I was just trying to comfort a scared old man before surgery. I held his hand and told him he'd be okay. I had no idea that the man I was sitting beside, shaking in pain, was the one who signed my paycheck and would soon change my life forever. Before I tell you how one moment of kindness changed everything, hit that like button, subscribe, and stick with me till the end, because this isn't just a story about a hospital. It's a story about humanity, power, and what happens when hearts meet in the most unexpected ways. I've been a nurse for almost 10 years now. I'm a Black woman, born and raised in a working class family where love was loud and sacrifice was quiet. Nursing wasn't just a career choice for me, it was personal. I watched my grandmother slowly fade in a hospital bed, alone except for the nurses who held her hand when we couldn't be there. I never forgot that. I wanted to be that person for someone else, the one who stays, the one who cares when nobody else does. People think being a nurse is all about medicine and machines, but it's really about moments. Some are beautiful, like watching a baby take its first breath, or a patient finally standing on their own after weeks of trying. But it's also grief, long nights, the beep of machines that don't stop, the sound of crying behind a curtain. You learn to live inside that space, between life and death. And some days it breaks you a little. Still, I've never wanted to be anywhere else. There's something sacred about walking into a room and being the calm in someone else's storm. That's the part I hold on to. But one day, everything shifted. Not in a dramatic sirens blaring kind of way. It started with a hand, an old man's hand, trembling on a hospital bed. I held it because that's what I do. I talked to him like he was someone I loved. I didn't know who he was. He didn't know who I was. But that moment, that tiny, quiet moment, turned out to be the beginning of something I never saw coming. Something that would change my career, my life, and the way I understood power, kindness, and being seen. It was just supposed to be another shift. I came in early, like always, grabbed my badge, tossed on my scrubs, and tied my hair back. The hospital smelled like coffee, antiseptic, and exhaustion, that strange mix you stop noticing after a few years. I remember the air feeling heavy that day. It wasn't anything specific, just that kind of tired energy floating around when people are stretched thin and holding it together with caffeine and habit. We were short-staffed, as usual. Two nurses had called out sick, and the ER was backed up. Everyone was moving fast, heads down, trying to catch up. I didn't even get my full break that day. I think I had 2 bites of a sandwich and then got called to pre-op for a last-minute addition to the schedule. The patient was listed as male approximately 70s, abdominal surgery, no family listed. Nothing unusual. I walked into the room, and he was sitting up slightly in the bed, hands fidgeting with the blanket. Thin, pale gray hair combed back like he'd made an effort to look decent. His eyes met mine, and for a second, I saw something. Fear, maybe? Loneliness? He looked out of place, not just because he was older, but because of the way he kept scanning the room like it all felt unfamiliar. I smiled and introduced myself. He didn't say much at first, just nodded. I started going through the usual pre-op routine, checking vitals, confirming his name and the procedure, explaining what would happen next. He was polite but quiet. After a while, I could tell he wasn't just nervous. He was scared. His fingers were cold, and he kept asking small questions, not about the surgery, but about things like whether I'd be there when he woke up or how long it would hurt. At one point, he whispered, "Do you stay with people? Or do you just, move on to the next one?" That hit me. I sat down beside him. "I stay," I said, "as long as I can." He looked at me, and for the first time, he smiled. A small, tired smile, but it changed the whole room. When they came to wheel him to surgery, he reached out and grabbed my hand. Not roughly, just like he needed to anchor himself. I held it. I didn't think twice. "Thank you," he said. "You made me feel human again." I walked away thinking it was just another moment, one of those little exchanges you carry quietly. I didn't know that someone had been watching, that this man wasn't just another patient, that this shift wasn't just another Tuesday. At that point, I had no clue how important that small moment had been, but soon I would find out just how closely I'd been seen, and by whom. He wasn't the first scared patient I'd comforted, and he definitely wouldn't be the last. But there was something different about the way he held my hand, like he hadn't been touched gently in a very long time, like he didn't expect anyone to sit with him, much less treat him like a person. While the anesthesiologist was getting things ready, I stayed. I didn't need to. I had 100 things waiting for me, but something in my gut told me to just be there. He looked at me and asked, softly, "Do people ever get used to this?" I smiled. "You mean hospitals?" He nodded. I thought for a moment and said, "I think some people get used to the noise, the smells, the waiting, but no one ever really gets used to the fear." He didn't say anything right away. Then he asked, "Do you?" I blinked. "Me?" He nodded again. "You see this every day. People scared, people hurting. Doesn't it wear on you?" I was caught off guard by the question. Most patients don't ask that. They're usually too caught up in their own pain. I told him the truth. Some days it does. But I remind myself that if I can make just one person feel less alone, even for a second, it's worth it. He looked at me for a long time, like he was studying my face. Not in a creepy way, just quiet, like he was searching for something. Then he said, "You remind me of someone." She had that same look in her eyes, like she saw people. I didn't ask who he meant. I just nodded and smiled. Then he chuckled, just a little, and said, "Well, if I die on the table, I'm glad you were the last person I talked to." I laughed nervously and squeezed his hand. "Let's not plan for that, okay?" It was the kind of interaction that happens all the time in hospitals, but also never really happens. Real, honest, human, no titles, no roles, just two people connecting in a moment of vulnerability. When they finally rolled him out, he didn't let go of my hand right away. He gave it one last gentle squeeze. I smiled and waved as he disappeared behind the doors. Then I exhaled, shook off the weight of the moment, and moved on to my next task. That's what we're taught to do as nurses. Be present, be strong, and then keep going. But something about that exchange lingered in my chest. Not heavy, just there, like a small light that hadn't gone out yet. Later, I would come to understand why that moment stayed with me. Because that 5-minute conversation, that shared laugh, that squeeze of a hand, it wasn't just kindness for kindness's sake. It was a seed. And someone with a lot more power than I realized, had been paying attention. After that moment, I didn't expect anything. I went back to my usual routine, charting vitals, checking IVs, helping a patient walk for the first time post-surgery. Just a normal shift. Or so I thought. A few hours later, I passed the nurse's station on my way to grab a spare blanket. Two of the doctors were huddled near the whiteboard, whispering, not in the usual way staff whisper when they're just trying to keep a conversation quiet, but that real kind of whisper, the kind that feels secret. I didn't mean to eavesdrop. I wasn't even trying to listen, but I heard it anyway. Just one line, but it froze me. "Yeah, that's him. That's the guy. He owns the whole thing." I slowed down. At first, I thought I must have misheard. Owns the what? I wondered. I leaned around the corner just slightly, pretending to organize some supplies while I listened. I know, I shouldn't have, but something about the way they were talking made my stomach twist. One of the doctors, an older man, said, "He does this every few years, comes in as a regular patient, never announces who he is, wants to see how people treat him when they don't know." I stopped moving. Wait, could they be talking about my patient? I replayed the moment in my head. No family listed, no flashy clothes, just a quiet, kind old man with a worn wedding ring and tired eyes. He hadn't acted like someone powerful. He hadn't expected anything. If anything, he seemed grateful just to be seen. I went to the front desk and casually asked to look at the patient log again. I needed to update my notes, I said, but really, I was looking for something. Anything that would make this all make sense. His name was listed as Henry B. No last name spelled out. That's not unusual. We often abbreviate for privacy. But still, something felt off. Later that afternoon, one of the techs said, "You know that guy you sat with earlier? Apparently, he's loaded, like founder level loaded." My heart started racing. Founder? Founder of what? I played it cool, asked casually. Like, what kind of loaded? She laughed. Like, owns the building you're standing in loaded. I went quiet. I didn't know whether to laugh or panic. I mean, was this real? Did I just hold the hand of the man who owned the entire hospital? The same man I told not to worry, who I joked with, who I treated just like everyone else? I kept thinking, did I say anything stupid? Did I cross a line? Should I have acted differently? But then I stopped myself. I did what I always do. I showed up with my heart first. No filter, no performance, just care. And somehow, he saw that. He saw me. And that was the moment everything started to shift. By the next morning, the rumor had spread like wildfire, though no one said it too loud. It was still hush hush, like we weren't supposed to know. The man I had held hands with, the quiet, polite man who looked at me like I was the only person in the room, wasn't just a patient. He was the patient, the man who had built this hospital from the ground up, a retired surgeon, philanthropist, and apparently the silent owner of multiple hospital branches, including ours. No one had seen him in years, and few even knew what he looked like. He was known by reputation, a kind of myth around the admin offices, the founder who walked away from the spotlight, choosing to remain behind the scenes while his legacy lived on in buildings, programs, and donations. And yet, there he was, quietly checking himself in, no entourage, no private suite, no demands. I was stunned. I didn't know what to think at first. I sat in the break room staring at the wall, coffee going cold in my hands. I wasn't scared exactly, more shocked, overwhelmed. The kind of feeling you get when your reality shifts just enough to make everything feel a little tilted. Then I started replaying everything in my head. The way he looked at me when I spoke. The way he asked if people stay or just move on. The way he said I reminded him of someone. How he told me I made him feel human again. He hadn't been testing the system. He'd been testing the people. He came in as a stranger to see how he'd be treated when nobody knew who he was. And the part that stuck with me the most, he'd asked for me. After his surgery, the surgeon told me, he mentioned you in post-op, said you were the only one who made him feel safe before going under. I didn't know what to say. My voice caught in my throat. Later that day, my nurse manager called me into her office. I thought maybe I was in trouble. Maybe I'd crossed a line, stayed too long in the room, said something too personal. But she was smiling. "He asked about you," she said, specifically. I blinked. "What do you mean?" "He said he wants to speak to you, personally. Don't worry, it's nothing bad. In fact, he said he was impressed." That word hit me in a way I didn't expect. Impressed? By what? I didn't do anything out of the ordinary. But that's when I realized something. Sometimes it's not about doing something big. Sometimes people remember how you made them feel in the quietest, simplest moments, the ones where no one's watching, the ones you almost forget. And apparently, one of those moments had reached someone I never imagined would notice, someone with the power to change lives, including mine. 2 days later, I was asked to report to the executive floor. Now, let me tell you, nurses don't usually get called up there. That's where the suits work: administrators, board members, legal teams. I'd only been up there once before for CPR training in one of the conference rooms. Everything was glass and silence and polished floors. Not exactly a place where scrubs feel like they belong. My hands were sweating as I stepped off the elevator. I kept thinking, what if I said something wrong? What if I made him uncomfortable and now I'm getting written up in some fancy HR language? A woman in a blazer met me at the door and smiled. "He's expecting you." I was led into a small lounge, and there he was, Mr. Henry Barnes. That was his full name. Sitting comfortably in an armchair by the window, out of his hospital gown and into a crisp sweater and slacks, like he'd just stepped out of a magazine for retired billionaires. He stood to shake my hand. "You came," he said warmly. I nodded, completely unsure what to say. "Of course." He gestured for me to sit. "I won't keep you long. I just wanted to talk, as two people." What followed was one of the most surreal conversations of my life. He told me about his early days, how he'd started as a young surgeon in the very same building, back when it was half the size, how he watched patients come and go, and how over time the system became more about numbers than names. He hated that. So he stepped away, put his energy into building a healthcare group that could prioritize care over profit. But even the best intentions, he said, can get buried in paperwork and policies. So sometimes I come back, I walk the halls, I become a patient, and I pay attention. He paused, looked me in the eye. I've done this maybe 5 or 6 times over the last decade, and no one, not once, has treated me like you did. Not with pity, not with distance, just presence. That matters. I didn't know what to say. I felt my eyes starting to sting. He continued, "You reminded me of my late wife. She was a nurse, too. Same quiet strength, same refusal to treat people like broken parts. I saw her in you." That was it. Tears welled in my eyes. I tried to hold them back, but one slipped out. I wiped it away quickly, embarrassed. Then he smiled and said, "I'd like to offer you something. Full tuition, if you ever want to continue your education. And more than that, I'd like to create a new patient support program in your name, because what you gave me, that feeling, that's what healing really looks like." I couldn't breathe for a moment. The room blurred around me. It wasn't just about the scholarship or the program. It was the fact that he saw me, really saw me, without a name tag, without a title, just a human who showed up for another. And somehow, that was enough to change everything. After that meeting with Mr. Barnes, I left the executive floor in a daze. I kept replaying every word in my head, holding on to it like a dream I didn't want to wake up from. A scholarship? A program in my name? I was just doing my job. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I wasn't chasing anything. I was just being me, showing up with compassion, being the kind of nurse I wished my grandma had. And somehow, that simple act had opened a door I didn't even know existed. Over the next few weeks, everything changed. The hospital board officially announced the creation of the Human Moments Initiative, a program designed to train and support nurses and staff in emotional care, bedside presence, and building real human connection with patients. Mr. Barnes insisted it be named after me, the Maya Grant Program, even though I tried to talk him out of it. I didn't want attention. I didn't want anyone thinking I'd done anything special. But he said, "That's exactly why your name should be on it." They asked me to help design part of the training. Me, a floor nurse, sitting in meetings with executives, patient advocates, and directors. It was terrifying at first. I didn't speak the same corporate language. I didn't have any titles after my name. But what I did have was experience, real, on the ground, in the room knowledge of what patients needed when they were scared, and what nurses needed when they felt burned out and unseen. People listened to me. For the first time, I felt like my voice had weight. And that wasn't all. Mr. Barnes followed through on his promise. My tuition for graduate school was fully covered. I cried when I got the acceptance letter into a leadership and patient advocacy program. Me, the first in my family to even graduate college, was now headed toward a master's degree. Some of my coworkers started treating me differently, not in a bad way, just more respectfully. Like my opinion mattered more now. A few even asked for advice, like I suddenly knew everything. I didn't. I still don't. But I tried my best to be honest, to stay grounded, to remember where I started, because no matter what title I might hold one day, whether it's educator, administrator, or director, I will always be a nurse first, the kind who holds hands, the kind who stays when others don't, the kind who knows that every patient is a person and every moment is an opportunity to make someone feel seen. I never imagined that something so small, just being present, just being kind, could lead to something so big. But maybe that's the point. Maybe it's the small things that actually matter the most. And maybe, just maybe, I wasn't meant to stay where I was. Maybe I was always meant to become something more, without ever losing who I was to begin with. I thought maybe it would stay quiet. I thought maybe this would be something just between me, Mr. Barnes, and a few people at the hospital. But word got out. It started small. One of the hospital newsletters ran a piece about the new patient care initiative. They mentioned my name briefly, nothing flashy. But then a local health magazine picked it up. Then a nurses association reposted it on social media. And then suddenly, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. People were tagging me, emailing me, even reaching out from other states. Some were just saying congratulations. Others were asking how they could bring the Maya grant program to their hospitals. And a few were skeptical. Why her? I heard someone say in the break room when they didn't know I was nearby. At first, all the attention made me uncomfortable. I'm not used to the spotlight. I don't want it, really. I'm not the face of change. I'm just a nurse who sat with a scared man because it felt like the right thing to do. But Mr. Barnes told me something I'll never forget. He said, "It's not about being a hero. It's about giving people permission to care again. And for that, people need a story." I realized he was right, so I let myself be part of the story. Not for praise, not for ego, but because if my story could make even one nurse feel like they mattered again, it was worth it. And honestly, some beautiful things came from it. I started getting invited to speak at workshops and nursing panels. I was terrified the first time. I practiced in the mirror for days, worried my voice would shake or my story wouldn't be enough.
But every time I spoke, I looked into the crowd and saw heads nodding, eyes tearing up, people who'd been there, burned out, overlooked, exhausted, finally feeling seen. I got messages from nurses who were ready to quit but stayed one more day because my story reminded them why they started. And not just nurses, patients too. One woman wrote to me saying she had been in and out of hospitals her whole life and had forgotten what it felt like to be treated with dignity until a nurse sat and held her hand during a scary night. That's when I really got it. This story wasn't about me, it was about all of us. Every nurse who holds a hand, every tech who takes an extra minute, every doctor who kneels down to speak eye to eye with a patient. Every staff member who shows up every day, even when they're tired, even when no one's watching. My moment with Mr. Barnes was just the spark. But the fire belonged to everyone who chose compassion over convenience. And if sharing my story helped that flame grow, then I'd tell it 100 times over. Months passed. Life settled into a new rhythm. I balanced shifts at the hospital with evening classes. The Maya Grant program began rolling out across a few other hospitals. Nurses I'd never met were reaching out, sharing how they used the training to connect more deeply with patients. It was humbling, surreal. But the real full circle moment came one afternoon while I was making rounds. I walked into a room where a young man sat nervously on the edge of the bed. Pre-op, first surgery. You could see the fear in his eyes, no matter how hard he tried to hide it. I sat next to him, gently took his hand, and said, "It's okay to be scared. You're not alone in this." He blinked. Then he smiled softly, like something inside him had just relaxed. Just like he had, all those months ago. I had become what Mr. Barnes saw in me from the beginning, not just a caregiver, but a comforter. Someone who knew how powerful a moment of presence could be. Later that evening, I got a short note slipped under the break room door. "You were the only one who made me feel safe today. Thank you. T." I folded it and tucked it into my locker. It sits there with a few other little notes I've collected, reminders that this work, though hard and often invisible, matters. Not because it makes headlines, not because it earns awards, but because it reaches people where they are. One quiet, honest moment at a time. And I realized this is what full circle really means, not just rising, but lifting others as you do, not just being seen, but choosing to see people every single day. Looking back, I never imagined that holding a stranger's hand would change my life. I didn't know he owned the hospital. I didn't know he had the power to shape programs, fund degrees, or spark a movement. All I knew in that quiet room was that he was human and scared. And so was I, in my own way. But I stayed, and that moment, so small, so simple, turned into something bigger than I ever dreamed. Not because I'm special, I'm not. I'm just a nurse who led with my heart. And maybe that's the point. We think change has to be loud, flashy, planned, but sometimes it looks like sitting down, taking a breath, reaching out, saying, "You're not alone." So if you're watching this and you've ever felt invisible, like what you do doesn't matter, let me tell you something. It does. You do. Your kindness, your patience, your presence, it echoes in ways you may never see. And maybe one day it will come back to you in the most unexpected way, just like it did for me. If this story touched you, share it. Not for me, but for every nurse, caregiver, and quiet hero out there who needs to be reminded that their heart still matters. And if you've ever felt that nudge to be kind, to stay a little longer, to reach out, do it. Because you never know who's on the other side of that moment. It could be someone who changes your life, or someone whose life you just changed. Thank you for listening. And remember, never underestimate the power of one small human moment.